Well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your breakout sessions and networking and lunch, dinner, breakfast, whatever time zone you're on. Great to have you back. And now we have a rather special conversation about what some folks are calling the next big thing or the next big platform. And to help us make sense of this topic, it is my pleasure to introduce to you an old friend of FOSI's, Antigone Davis. Antigone is the director and global head of safety at Meta, the company formerly known as Facebook. And she and her panel are going to take us into the metaverse. So over to you, Antigone.
Well, I wish I were actually taking you fully into the metaverse, although I think that James has a surprise for us. So let me take just a minute to introduce you to James Hairston. He heads up our policy efforts for FRL, and I'm going to very quickly give you an introduction also to the other guest, Dr. Bernstein, who is a former Sesame Street workshop exec and has worked on some of, I would say, the most compelling and interesting projects that I have seen, and that I think the reason that he's here is he can really talk a little bit about the learnings that he's had there and how they can transfer into the metaverse. And I think there are some real opportunities, and I think he'll also have some good guidance for safeguards for us. Before I start, I just want to kind of address at the top, because this is Meta, formerly known, I guess, as Stephen said, as Facebook, which I'm glad to see it move so quickly off of his tongue. It's probably harder for me. I have a little bit of the challenge of, like, when the year goes from 2020 to 2021, it takes me about 6 months before I'm actually using 2021 on checks or anywhere else. And so it's going to take me a little while, but I'm getting there. But before we dive in, I did just want to take a second, because I know probably on the top of people's mind are some of the unfortunate news in relation to Facebook in the last few weeks and months. And while it's not the company the news coverage does not reflect the company that I know really well, I do want people to know that the research that people saw that was leaked is actually research that we use specifically for some of the things that we're going to talk about today. It's actually to improve our product, it's to improve our experiences, it's to point us toward better and deeper research that we need to do. And I think you'll see today that we are approaching our experience, our move into the metaverse with the kind of learning mode that we always deploy, which is how do we take everything that we've learned in the last 15 years and actually apply it to what we do going forward, and ensure that we approach this next phase of innovation with a very responsible, thoughtful effort coming forward. So before I switch to the overall panel, I think for a minute, people probably first and foremost want to know, like, what the heck is the metaverse? So James, I'm going to turn it to you to kind of show people a little bit what that is.
Sure. And thank you, Antigone, and thanks, FOSI, for having us here for this discussion. We thought it might be helpful just to show a couple of quick slides that to give some color to what the metaverse is, which is really this evolution of the computing that we do today, where we are removed from a lot of the interactions that we have with the social interactions we may have on our computers, on our mobile phones. The idea of the metaverse is really a sort of set of digital experiences that are interconnected, so that you can move between them, and sort of, rather than being and interacting with our computing at a state of remove, we are sort of really immersed in them in new ways, and they are layered onto the environments around us, whether it's using our mobile phones or future smart glasses or virtual reality headsets. And so what you're seeing here on your screen is just a sort of look at what the potential could be for sort of augmented reality in our day-to-day experience, whether it's for education or productivity. If we click through to the next slide, this just sort of gives a sense and a description of, of what the metaverse will be and how it will exist around us. This sort of synchronous environment where we can be together, a sort of hybrid between sort of some of what we understand in social platforms today, but we're embodied, where we are part of our computing. And that might be for immersive calling and interacting with friends and family or coworkers. It could be for gaming, but also a lot of the computing that we do today. And again, cutting across many different types of devices, not designed or built by one company, but this sort of next leap in sort of computing. The next slide just quickly shows, what even something like fitness could look like in the metaverse, where, using many of our day-to-day interactions and having virtual overlays or augmented overlays on the world around us could really change the way that we interact and that we get information about ourselves and connect with other people. And then this final slide will just sort of shows, how these overlays might change the way we do basic things like have our calls, or you might have an avatar of a friend or a loved one sit at your dining room table, and that may be provided through your phone. It may be through a set of connected smart glasses. So it's really about this embodied future of our computing, and look forward to really discussing what that's going to mean, some of the opportunities, some of the challenges with the panel here today.
So thanks, James. Just before I kick it over to you, this does really make me think about when I first joined Meta, and one of the big conversations that we were having at the time is in the context of bullying and harassment, and how in a 2D screen-to-screen experience, sometimes it's hard for people to really have the kind of empathy that they might have if they were in the room with somebody. And we tried to address that through some various tools that we built on the platform. But I think there's a real opportunity here and some of the research shows that in a 3D more immersive experience, you actually have better opportunities to create and build empathy. You also have some opportunities to open up new doors of bullying and harassment where you're in somebody's space. And these are things that the team is thinking about really quite carefully. So before I bring Dr. Bernstein into this conversation, let me first ask you, James, what are some of the ways that you're thinking about and have already started thinking about and preparing for sort of the potential additional challenges, but some of the potential additional opportunities, and how are you investing in that way?
Yeah, well, just today, actually, we announced a set of global partners that we'll be working with to advance digital literacy. I mean, it really starts with really working with expert communities around the world, including, Dr. Bernstein, who's with us here today, on how we build these technologies responsibly, how we learn from, what we've gathered in sort of the 2D and traditional web environments today, and sort of best practices in safety and research. So, just a few weeks ago, we announced that over the next 2 years, we'll be investing $50 million, in sort of how to build the metaverse responsibly. And this work on sort of safety is just a key pillar. And one of the things we know is that it's going to take research from experts in all different disciplines on the types of tooling and the types of interactions to promote on sort of the impact of the technologies. And so we've made that public commitment. We'll also be working with the Digital Wellness Lab, on literacy and EverFi. And so this is just the beginning of this journey. But in addition to the work that we do internally on tooling, we really want to engage the global community early and often, well before these products are built, on how to do this well and thoughtfully.
Well, I'm going to turn it to you, Dr. B, for a minute. First of all, forgive me for calling Dr. B, but he and I have a long relationship, Dr. Bernstein. So one of the things, that I think Sesame Street, certainly Sesame Street Workshop encountered, was some real skepticism around media and around television media, and how to bring that to young people in a way that people felt was added value. And I'd love to hear sort of your thoughts on how you worked through that and what might apply here.
So I will compare and contrast those days 50 some odd years ago with today. And to quote my late father-in-law, It's exactly the same, but entirely different. So when we started with Sesame Street, television was considered at best by Newt Minow a vast wasteland, and at worst, a place where children were going to learn violence and aggressiveness. And what we did with Sesame was we said, it doesn't have to be that way. Let us take our time and be deliberate and think about what kind of tools we can use to work with academics and advisors to develop content, key content that children needed, that would be really something very important for the time. And the zeitgeist at that time was the civil rights movement was really beginning and awakening. There was an unpopular war. It was the day of the hippies and great music. It was a great of a iconoclast kind of a feeling. And so we developed Sesame out of those days. Today, we're at another inflection. It's a very different zeitgeist. And in comparison to the late 60s, I'd say that our world is kind of both in reality and digitally kind of out of control, with people feeling forces are beyond us, with our sense of values lagging so way behind the advancement of technology. And here comes the metaverse. And here comes Meta in the metaverse. And I think one of the great things is that we have a chance to reboot. We have a chance to rethink. We have a chance to take whatever lessons we've learned from the internet over these past 10, 15, 20 years and say, how do we do it better? As somebody called it in the game world, Brenda Romero said, I want a better verse, not just a metaverse. And I think what we want to do is think a little bit about the power of this technology to make you feel like you're there, you're present, and so that you can explore new worlds. And not only just the new worlds of space and underwater, which is really great, and think about the environment, what we can do to control the environment. But really, how do you learn to empathize, to show compassion, to, in some ways, to stand up and be an upstander to a bully? So I think there's a great potential here, just as there was when we started Sesame in the 1960s, knowing, of course, the full differences. We were an educational program. You are a platform that will have many programs, but the analogies of the processes to be used are similar.
So let me jump in here, James, and kind of put a challenge to you. What are some of the things that you're doing to create a Metaverse?
Yeah, no, and I love that terminology, and I think it's it's so important to think about how we can design just well and thoughtfully from the beginning in those ways. One of the things we outlined last year for our Facebook Reality Labs division at the time, now Reality Labs, was our set of responsible innovation principles, which I think really are key to sort of what we're talking about here today on safety. And one of the key pieces of that, we have sort of 4 high-level principles that we use in day-to-day product design, and that inform our approach here. The first principle is to never surprise people, and that's to really lay out the vision of what's being built, how it's being built, so that we can collect some of the feedback that we talked about early and often, so that we're understanding, the potential harms, the opportunities for empathy and education, just like we've been discussing so far. The second of the innovation principles, which guides this work in the metaverse, the responsible innovation principles, is to provide controls that matter, and that's both controls for individual people while they are in these experiences or while they're encountering these technologies, but also, of course, for parents and for family members to make sure that there's education and control over the experiences. Considering everyone, the different age groups that will be using these products, and making sure we're designing with everyone in mind is the third of those principles. And then the fourth is really to put people at the forefront of the building and the development. So these core responsible innovation principles, getting out in front of things early, really investing in great controls, considering all of the different types of people and their experiences are sort of on the internal side, some of the things that guide every bit of our development of the metaverse. Another key part of this, because these technologies technologies are not going to be built by one company. They will be built by many different types of developers and contributors. We also spend a lot of time on trying to build the best practices and the tools that can be used by creators and developers of all sorts. So safety tooling that really help advance individual safety, group safety in experiences, and that takes a lot of work to sort of invest in tooling that doesn't just work for one company or one entity, but works across surfaces, works for many different types of experiences, whether they're productivity or gaming or like more traditional social networks. So really doing that work to figure out the best practices in there. We're part of the XR Association, which includes many of the leading companies developing augmented and virtual reality, where the focus is, how do we build and develop the tools that can be used across the industry that advance safety, and tools like better blocking and better reporting, and making sure that those systems talk to each other and that developers all throughout the ecosystem have access to those. So those are just some of the ways that we approach both the internal development and how we communicate and the transparency, but then also trying to sort of contribute to the best practices that will improve the industry and people's experience beyond just the experiences that we create at Meta.
Yeah, I actually want to give a big shout out to your efforts in helping to develop and build out the XR Association. I think, judging from my own work at Meta and where the industry was at the time that I came in, and Meta had already been, existed for quite a while. We were not at a place at that point where you had that sort of cross-industry efforts going, and cross-industry efforts have come, they've lagged. Whereas it's really great to see in the world of the metaverse that you see cross-industry efforts in terms of safety and responsible innovation actually beginning at the beginning, as opposed to somewhere down the road. And I do think that reflects back to the first question on what have you learned, and how have you taken what we've learned as a company from early on to now, and really applied that here. And it's great to see. And maybe when we come back to you in a second, I'd love to hear some of the tools and things that you've thought of as an association and have seen come out of that association. But I want to turn to, I think it was the second of the four that you mentioned, where you talked about parents and kids. And I'd love to hear from Dr. Bernstein. I know that there was some surveys earlier in the presentations around kids' feelings of safety inside of in their online experiences, and parents, and some interesting learnings that were presented there that I think could be very valuable to both the work for the folks building the metaverse, but I think Dr. Bernstein, you having addressed some of these same kinds of questions probably have some really good insights in terms of what would be really valuable for folks thinking about this, for parents and young people.
Well, I think the first thing was that the morning session was really just so interesting, and the survey was really wonderful, and it probably confirmed a lot of what common sense would have said, in that I think 80% of the young people surveyed, 13 to 18 and then 18 to 24, felt they were kind of comfortable and felt that kindness was very much part of the world that they were exploring. And 20% felt uncomfortable. The 80-20% rule was pretty much there. And I think one of the things that parents felt was that they felt they were aware of their children's online activity, but probably 50% felt uncomfortable in not being able to help them more, to feel more safe. And that even though tools existed, they felt overwhelmed about how to use those tools. And I think one of the things we learned on Sesame was that we tried to provide information on a dual level when we had a program that was meant for children, but that in most ways did not in any way take away from the child, but gave information to parents using celebrities, but using language where we went to advisors to get their best input in how to talk to a child that we could use as a model for parents to learn. And I think providing scripts for parents, providing examples of how to talk about safety, It's as difficult for a parent, often I think of my own children, talking to my grandchildren, how to talk about safety online as it is to talk about sex. It's almost as if, leave it to the school. I can't talk about it, leave it to somebody else. But we can't leave it to somebody else. So giving them scripts and giving them help. I think in the metaverse itself, creating material in which parents and children maybe have to go to the surfer dude parents versus the tiger mom parents and see different ways of talking to a child and talking to the youth might be a possibility to explore in the metaverse itself. But one other thing I think is really important. Content will matter here. And we know that young people are going to jump onto the metaverse. And when we started with Sesame, we knew what was attractive to them was entertainment. So the key will be how best to integrate the lessons, the education that we want to do with entertainment so that it doesn't feel like education. It just feels one whole unit, one whole self. And I think the metaverse will provide that opportunity.
I'm gonna, before I go back to you, James, I'm liking kind of this back and forth. I hope that's okay for all. But one of the things that I think with regard to both things that you've just said, there are a couple of advancements that we've seen in other products of late coming out of Meta. So one is actually a move to have supervisory and visibility tools for parents inside of their teen experience on Instagram. This is something that we've really seen parents are looking for. They want to have additional visibility so that they even know how to have these conversations and where to begin. And Dr. Bernstein, you saw some of the work that we did around Messenger Kids, and one of the things that we've really tried to do inside of Messenger Kids is to build out opportunities for parents to interact with their children on issues of privacy, on issues of kindness online, and building that into the actual product experience in order to really facilitate those conversations and start them as early as is possible, because certainly by 13 and above, you start to have a little bit of the more resistance from children in terms of parents' immediate guidance. James, on that front, are there specific things that you're thinking about, or programs that you're looking at, or investments that you're making in relation to parents and young people, or are you just at the formative stages in that regard?
Well, I mentioned the sort of 2-year $50 million fund that is expanding the literacy work, and so I think that is going to continue to be a key mechanism for working with organizations that are going to expand our understanding. On the content side, we've also just announced $150 million globally, just to begin to create sort of some of the content that we just talked about to encourage new types of educational experiences to be built in immersive environments, to bring more creators to the table that are designing, different types of experiences that will really improve experience. So, I mentioned those because I think that will all be key to building this ecosystem. And to Dr. Bernstein's point about the importance of content, I think that will all be essential to where we head next. As in addition to sort of some of the technical work that we've been thinking about, and some of the with the parental controls and sort of the investments and understanding what we will need to build and what we can learn from products that have already been in motion, and the great groundwork that's already been done by your teams and others across Facebook. We're also this new set of immersive computing environments gives us opportunities to look at the norms that develop in other sort of similar immersive environments, whether it's in sort of gaming environments, which for all of the really creative and amazing experiences we know can happen there. There are also challenges with toxicity that are top of mind, and really understanding the norms that young people develop in those spaces and learning from the constructive ways that communities develop and interact. So all of this work is just beginning, but there are technical components, the best practices and the parental controls, investing in the digital literacy for young people and for parents, but then also really taking a look at the content development and then the norms that are established in some of the similar environments, whether they're immersive or gaming, and trying to draw out the best lessons and apply those to what gets built, how it's built, and how it's communicated to families and to people that are using this next generation of computing devices and services.
So I'm going to do what no moderator should do, which is to give you guys each a little bit of a surprise question. Don't let it seem like it's worth doing. So James, before I jump off of you, you've been working at this for a while. You've had a chance to see lots of different creations and in the metaverse, from not only from within our company, but from working with other companies. If I said to you, can you name, like, I won't say just one because I hate when people do that to me, but like one or two, or even just one, if you want to give just one, of like the favorite things that you've seen created, and sort of share with people what the opportunity is there in a vivid way, that would be great. And then Dr. Bernstein, you've got a little bit of a preview as to the question that's coming to you. So you have a little bit more time to think about it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I love these questions, and I love this question because it really gets at, one of the things that inspires me, and I think many of the people that work on these technologies so much. I mean, I really, what I both have seen that is really inspirational and what I love to see more of are institutions and communities who really take these technologies and make them their own in an unexpected way. Not the companies that are sort of formally building the technology, but when you have museums, hospitals all over the world that, take and create immersive training content. We've seen everything from the Children's Hospital at Stanford sort of turn VR into a tool for educating parents about rare heart defects, to tools that are used in similar children's hospitals to reduce the fear and stress of heading into a surgery and reducing the need for different types of medicines. And so you think about things like that, or museums that can expand access to their collections globally, or provide, additional information there live for, maybe for folks who can't move around to different parts of the museum or see different places. I mean, there are just so many things. And I think the best uses, the uses that inspire me the most, come from just new communities who are saying, this immersive technology can do a lot of things. And interestingly, just a few days ago, the government in Seoul announced that it wants to be, in the city of Seoul in South Korea, said that it wants to bring city services into the metaverse. And so make them immersive, and things you can imagine, things like disaster relief and mapping and all of the different types of useful tools that could be overlaid into our day-to-day interaction. So I think those are the uses that really get going. The possibilities for education, like we've talked about here, and empathy building really are endless. And I think it's even greater when those designs and interventions come from not the companies that are building the day-to-day infrastructure, but from the museums and institutions that actually put them to use for people in really innovative ways.
I imagine that there are already a number of like elite athletes and things like this who are using these kinds of experiences to work their way through a championship game and anticipate what the experience is going to feel like and prepare themselves for it. I think there's so many possibilities. So now, Dr. Bernstein, I want to turn it to you, because I think you've had a lifetime, a career of imagining the possibilities with media and the opportunities that it creates, and have created some of them involve like actual peacemaking, or using tools like Sesame Street. And I'd love to hear from you. What are one or two of the things that you could imagine here and that you hope to see come forward?
When I was growing up, there was a television program called You Are There. And in some ways, the metaverse is real. You really are there. You really feel that. And I think the opportunity to be able to actually create an avatar and walk in a situation in which I worked on an Israeli-Palestinian version of Sesame Street long ago, to be able to have the experience of a Palestinian child walk into an Israeli environment and an Israeli child walk into a Palestinian environment, be able to understand each other virtually might lead to the reality of these things happening. I think you can seed possibilities on the metaverse that can become real if you modeled it well. I think that's going to be the key, is to, since your Meta will be one of the many developing these things, you'll have to have really good people who act like executive producers on a program, that is deciding what content gets in and what doesn't, making those decisions, thinking about that development. And you will also have to work with those researchers who are probably down the block from you, James, and that is the work that's been done at Stanford, Jeremy Bailenson and Jackie Bailey at the University of Texas, thinking about what are the problems in the technology, how long can a youth stay on it, and what are those challenges. There are wonderful challenges, but such wonderful opportunities. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how they develop and how I can help in that development.
Thank you. I know we're just about out of time here. I think, you know, if anything comes through, maybe it's a little bit of the 80-20 for me. There's this sort of, we have a real chance for opportunity even on the safety and well-being front here. And it's going to require that we step in, take what we've learned and really apply it and do things in a very thoughtful way, and actually do things in a way that involves all of industry looking at this together. So thank you both. It was great to get to have this conversation, and thank you to FOSI for giving us an opportunity to come forward and have this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.